The 2024 White Sox are the worst team in MLB history. Maybe. As I'm writing this, the Chi Sox have recently ended a brutal 21-game losing streak, a span that lasted from July 10th to August 6th. And for context of how goddamn long that was, Bobby Witt Jr. alone posted a 2.1 F-WAR in between White Sox wins. And this season, the Chi Sox leader in F-WAR is Paul DeJong at .9. And guess what? He's now Witt's backup in KC. But hey, if you aren't an advanced stats guy, that's perfectly fine, because this was tied for the longest losing streak in American League history. And since they currently have a winning percentage of .239, they're on a full season's pace of roughly 123 losses, which if they hit would be the second most in a single season in MLB history, and they join a group of two other teams who lost over 120. An exclusive group that the White Sox stick out like a sore thumb in, because the other two at least have some asterisks on them, but we'll get to that later. And to get even crazier, the White Sox also had a 14-game losing streak this year. And as Peter Bodie on Twitter explains, if you take away their 21 and 14-game losing streaks, so 35 losses off their record, they would still have the worst winning percentage in Major League Baseball. And this stretch was the final straw, as the White Sox finally pulled the plug on manager Pedro Grifol, replacing him with interim manager Grady Sizemore. But speaking of replacements, the Southsiders hit this new low right before Chris gets his 1-year anniversary as GM, a guy whose performance in his new role has onlookers concerned for this team's success post-2024. But you may be wondering, how are they this bad now? Well, let's get into it. But first, the elephant in the room. I'm not the voice you're used to hearing here on the channel, but don't worry, Jake, who usually voices the videos here, will be back next week. I, Peyton, an editor here over at MTC, who also runs Big League Analysis over on TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat, and even YouTube, will be filling in this week. So hopefully you enjoy my work in relief, but enough of that, let's dive into what might be the worst team ever. The glaring weakness of the White Sox is the offense. At the moment, the White Sox are hitting .216 with a .277 on base percentage, a .343 slug, and a .73 WRC+. And as you may imagine, these are all the worst marks in the game this season. But not only that on base percentage mark is the worst we've seen in MLB in 100 years. And for something more simple, they've only scored 360 runs, 63 less than any other ball club this season. Good for only 3.1 runs per game, and if that holds, it would be the lowest we've seen in a single season in 50 years. But who are the hitters responsible for this futility? Well, to start, only two players on this team with at least 100 plate appearances have an OPS over 700, and those are Paul DeJong and Tommy Pham. Which is funny, because not only is Paul DeJong, as I previously mentioned, the Kansas City Royal now, but Tommy Pham was traded to the Cardinals at the deadline. Outside of that, you have a banged up and underperforming Luis Robert, who's at a .207 average and a .687 OPS, and Andrew Vaughn and Corey Jokes behind him at .682 and .670 respectively. Everyone else with 100 plate appearances is below .650 in the OPS department. And for comparison, the league average in OPS is .713. According to OPS Plus, an adjusted version of the on-base plus slugging stat that accounts for factors like ballparks and puts it on a scale where 100 is always average, their best hitter still on the team is a tie between Luis Robert and Andrew Vaughn at 91. 9% below average. Everyone else on the squad is double-digit points away from league average, giving them a mark overall of 74 as a team. However, even the worst team can only be as good as their weakest link, or in this case, links. Because the 2024 White Sox are perfectly represented by two players, Andrew Benintendi and Martin Maldonado. To start with the better of the two, Andrew Benintendi was a solid player and World Series champion for the Red Sox. And following a good 2022 for the Royals and Yankees, he signed to the White Sox for 5 years and $75 million, a franchise record, as the Southsiders are one of two teams ever to never go into the triple digits on a single free agent. Cheapness from Jerry Reinsdorf, that's also a reason for this team's lack of roster. But back to Benny, his record-setting deal ironically later led to a franchise record losing streak, because in 2024, Benintendi's hitting .210 with a .263 on base percentage and a .613 OPS, and once adjusted for park factors, he's 28% below average, meaning when you pair it with his terrible defense, another factor we'll get into later, according to Baseball Reference, he has a wins above replacement of -1.9, meaning you watching have been more valuable to the White Sox than Benintendi. Well, actually not really, but honestly, it may as well be true. Regardless though, to be fair to Benintendi in a weird juxtaposition, he's actually been playing his best baseball during their losing streak. raising his OPS by 40 points while his team suffered. And when they finally broke the streak, a Benintendi home run was the big blow. So I mean, hey, he saved face a little bit. Something you can't quite say about Martin Maldonado. Because while the catcher's on-field coach role was valued for a competitive team like Houston, for a team with little to no playoff outlook, it's been a massive flop. As he hit a measly 119 with a 4.3 OPS, a mark worse than Juan Soto's on-base percentage, leaving him with an OPS plus of just 13, which funny enough wasn't even the worst in baseball this season, as former White Sox MVP Jose Abreu had a mark of just 3. But to be fair to Maldi in this entire offense, there's been another force holding them back, something that definitely won't get enough attention because they simply aren't good enough to get the benefit of the doubt, and that's luck. As Jay covered in a video last week, the White Sox have been getting smoked in the actual to expected stats department. As right now, the White Sox have the biggest negative difference in expected to actual average, expected to actual OBP, and expected to actual slugging percentage, having a pretty big lead over the guys in second to last, a place they hold even when you zoom out to past seasons, because at the moment they have the unluckiest slugging percentage in the history of expected stats, and they're technically the second unluckiest ever in terms of expected batting average and expected on base percentage, with the only team in front of them being the 2020 Reds, and they only had a 60-game season. And also when you consider their higher potential ceiling guys like Yoan Moncada and Eloy Jimenez are either now hurt or on another team, with their other competent pieces I mentioned being traded, there really isn't much potential to dream on here. But hey, I mean, even the worst offenses can sneak out wins when they pitch well. And that brings us to issue 2. The pitching. Weirdly enough, up until the deadline, they actually had an amazing one too. Garrett Crochet was one of the best pitchers in the AL, pitching to a 3.19 ERA with a K per 9 over 12. And Eric Fedde in his return from the KBO was excellent, pitching to an ERA around 3. But even with that, they still have the second worst ERA in baseball, with the only team behind them being the Colorado Rockies, who play on the moon. But with them shipping Fedde to St. Louis in a weird 3-team trade that also saw Pham go to the Cardinals and Michael Kopech go to the Dodgers for honestly not that much in return, and Crochet being on an innings limit after a weird holdout that tanked his value at the trade deadline. But even with 2 legit starters, why are they still bad in the first place? Why do they have the second worst ERA, the worst walk per 9, and the second worst homers per 9? Well, when Chris Flexen and Mike Soroka have ate a considerable amount of innings with ERAs over 5, and a young guy like Drew Thorpe is struggling out the gate of his MLB career, but honestly, I give the White Sox respect for giving him some run. But when you combine it with the hitting, the White Sox on average are losing games by 2 runs, half a run lower than everyone else. And to be fair to the arms, there's another factor that contributes to this that's not fully on the pitchers, and that's defense. At the moment, the White Sox have a negative 28 outs above average, Statcast main defensive analytic, which is the second worst in MLB right now, but good old-fashioned defensive runs saved is a lot more harsh, having the Southsiders at a negative 75 DRS, which is over double as bad as the second place Reds. And this could have them on pace to be the 6th team in defensive runs saved history to post a mark of negative 100 or below, highlighted by a 4-error game against the Reds and back-to-back 3-error games on April 7th and April 8th, specifically getting burned in the outfield by the aforementioned Benintendi and Gavin Sheets, and consistently getting burned behind the plate by guys like Maldonado and Corey Lee. Struggles exacerbated by a negative 23 DRS from first base, second base, third base, and short combined. But honestly, at this point, you're probably getting bored of me talking about how bad the White Sox are. You definitely get the point by now. So this brings us back to our original point. Are the White Sox the worst team ever? Well, as I mentioned in the beginning, the White Sox are on pace to be the 3rd team ever to lose 120 games, joining the 1899 Cleveland Spiders, who lost 134, and the 1962 Mets, who lost exactly 120. But let me tell you why those two aren't as bad as a potential 120L campaign from Chicago. First, the 1899 Cleveland Spiders was a classic case of conflict of interest, as brothers Frank and Stanley Robinson, the owners of the Spiders, also acquired the team in St. Louis, and seeing the opportunity to make more money with the higher attended games in St. Louis, they funneled all of the good players there, purposely letting the Spiders sink. And second, 1962 was the first year in Mets history So this is a pretty unfair competition to Chicago, as expansion teams are expected to be terrible. In fact, the best record by the first-year expansion team in MLB history was the 1961 Angels, and even then, they were still 20 games under 500. So when you have the extra context, while 120 losses is terrible no matter how you slice it, at least they have somewhat of a valid excuse. The 2024 White Sox are just a disaster from on the field to up to the front office. And that's why, barring them coming through to avoid the 120 loss mark, I'm willing to crown them the worst team ever. Historically bad offense and defense paired with abysmal pitching that may actually get worse is simply inexcusable for a franchise that's been around forever. And considering the new draft rules state a team that's not a part of revenue sharing can't pick top 10 in back-to-back seasons, this all-time bad year from the White Sox can at best give them the 10th pick in next year's draft. So that bad luck I referred to before extends way further than the ball field. But on the bright side, there will be massive changes to this team going forward. They will have a new manager next season unless Sizemore absolutely balls out in the interim role. And if GM Chris Getz, after a disastrous first year and deadline in charge, can right the ship and get a haul for Luis Robert and maybe even Garrett Crochet, they could reload the farm to have something pretty interesting in the near future. I mean, at the moment, they already have one of the most promising collections of young pitchers out of any organization in the game. A few more bats on top of Colson Montgomery, and they may actually be able to build something solid out the ashes of this train wreck of a team. However, for that to happen, the ball's in Chris Getz and the front office's court. And based on their track record and Reinsdorf's presence, my feelings are mixed. But what do you think about this White Sox squad? Can they be the worst ever? Regardless though, thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed, please remember to like and subscribe for more baseball videos just like this. Have a great rest of your day.